Hello and welcome back to my vlog. I'm off on a different venture and I do not plan to read this whole book. I don't know how much I'll read, but I came across this. It's from many years ago. It's called Tea Leaves, being a collection of letters and documents relating to the shipment of tea to the American colonies in the year 1773 by the East India Tea Company, now first printed from the original manuscript with an introduction, notes, and biographical notices of the Boston Tea Party by Francis S. Drake, Boston, A.O. Crane, 1884. Prefatory note. The collection of letters and documents which has occasioned the preparation of the present volume, though it has been so long buried in obscurity, appears to have been originally made with a view to publication. It was for many years, and until his decease, in the possession of Mr. Abel Bowen, a well-known engraver and publisher of Boston 60 years ago, and was obtained by him from a person who procured it in Halifax, N.S. I'm supposing that's Nova Scotia. Whither many valuable papers, both public and private, relating to New England, were carried, when in March 1776, the British and Tories evacuated Boston. It contains interesting information relative to the tea troubles that preceded the American Revolution, much of it new to students of that eventful period. To the kindness of Mrs. Benjamin Phipps and Mrs. Charles G. Butts of Chelsea, daughters of Mr. Bowen, the publisher is indebted for permission to make public this valuable contribution to American history. Publisher's Preface. When contemplating the publication of Tea Leaves, we issued a circular stating our intention, and that, judging from the material then in our possession, the book would contain about 250 pages with 6 illustrations, 3 of them portraits. We are happy to announce on the completion of the work not only fulfillment of our promise, but much that is additional thereto. Included in its 400 pages, which is why I don't plan to read the whole thing, are 20 portraits taken from family paintings, 1/2 never before published, 8 other illustrations, 50 autographs, 112 names of members of the Tea Party, 58 more than have been heretofore publicly known, and 96 biographies of the same. Our circular called for a subscription book. All our paper-covered copies have been subscribed for. The balance of the edition is nicely bound in cloth with embellished covers. Price, as before, $5. The publisher will welcome all new matter relating to the tea question and will be especially grateful for any hitherto unpublished portraits. Such material is desired for possible publication in a companion work to Tea Leaves. All who desire the portraits and illustrations separate from this volume to be used in works on American history can obtain them from the publisher. In conclusion, we thank our friends who have kindly assisted us, and if we have not given all credit by name, the neglect has been unintentional. A.O. Crane, 2169 Washington Street, Boston, Mass. Introduction. Among the causes which led to the American Revolution, the one most prominent in the popular judgment is the tax on tea, imposed by Great Britain on her American colonies. The destruction in Boston Harbor in December 1773 of the cargoes of tea sent to that port by the East India Company was undoubtedly the proximate cause of that memorable event, and in view of this fact, the occurrence, by far the most momentous in the annals of the town, says the historian Bancroft, merits a more thorough and particular consideration than it has yet received. The silence necessarily preserved by the actors in this daring exploit, respecting their connection with it, has rendered this part of the task one of no little difficulty. Their secret was remarkably well kept, and but for the family traditions which survive, we should know very little of the men who composed the famous Boston Tea Party. Nevertheless, the attempt to gather up the scattered fragments of personal reminiscence and biography in order to give a little more completeness to this interesting chapter of our revolutionary history is here made. The fortunate recovery by the publisher of this volume of the letters of the American consignees to the East India Company and other papers shedding light upon the transaction affords material aid in the accomplishment of our purpose. When King Charles II had finished that first cup of tea ever brewed in England, the gift of the newly created East India Company, no Sibyl was at hand to peer into the monarch's cup and foretell from its dregs the dire disaster to his realm, hidden among those insignificant particles. Could a vision of those battered tea chests floating in Boston Harbor with "Tu doces" in the legible handwriting of history inscribed upon them have been disclosed to him, even that careless, pleasure-loving prince would have been sobered by the lesson. It was left for his successor, George III, who failed to read the handwriting on the wall, visible to all but the willfully blind, to realize its meaning in the dismemberment of an empire. A survey of the progress of the revolution up to the beginning of the year 1773 will help us to understand the political situation. 10 years of constant agitation had educated the people of the colonies to a clear perception of their rights, and also to a knowledge that it was the fixed purpose of the home government to deprive them of the one they most valued, namely, that of being taxed with their own consent, through their local assemblies, as had always been the custom, and not at the arbitrary will of the British Parliament, a body in which they were not and could not be represented, 3,000 miles away. The strange thing about this is that the people of Great Britain should not have seen, in the light of their own past history, what they have since seen clearly enough, that the Americans were only contending for principles for which their own ancestors had often fought, and which they had more than once succeeded in wresting from the grasp of arbitrary and tyrannical sovereigns. Their difficulty seems to have been that they looked upon the Americans not as equals but as inferiors, as their subjects, and as having no rights that an Englishman was bound to respect. Even the celebrated moralist, Dr. Johnson, could say of the Americans, "They are a race of convicts and ought to be thankful for anything we allow them short of hanging." King George III, that obstinate but well-meaning monarch, and his ministers no doubt honestly believed that the republican tendencies of the colonists endangered British supremacy. Perhaps they were right in this, for it was the kind and degree of supremacy that was really in question. But in entertaining the belief that these tendencies could be eradicated at a blow, they were, as the event proved, grievously mistaken. Another moving cause for the new policy toward the colonies was the heavy taxation at home, a result of the late war. Some of this burden they hoped to transfer from their own shoulders to those of their transatlantic brethren. I believe that's the end of the introduction. I'm not sure of the actual flow through this thing, but there's a big line across that, so could be the end of the introduction. I don't know, but we'll have some more tomorrow. And I have no idea where I'm going to stop. I definitely want to get into some of the letters, etc., and so forth. That will be fun. So anyway, make it a great day, and bye for now.